Ladies and gentlemen, once again I'm here at this stand. I'm here to introduce our first speaker. So it is my pleasure to introduce the next session, which promises to be a lot of engagement and inspiration for all of us here. We all know that play is a universal language of childhood, a powerful tool for learning, exploration, and discovery. And today we have the privilege of delving deeper into this topic with Ms. Anne Van Dam, educational consultant at the Learning Square. Ms. Anne is an experienced international educator and educational consultant who is deeply passionate about the role of play in children's learning process. She had held various positions in the field of education, including that of a teacher, curriculum coordinator, head of school. Ms. Anne's keynote titled Unleashing the Power of Play, Nurturing Curiosity for Lifelong Learners will explore the transformative role of play in fostering curiosity and igniting a passion for learning that lasts for a lifetime. Over to you, Anne.
Yes, you did it. It's good to be here. It's so wonderful to be here. I can't tell you how long I've been looking forward to this opportunity to join you at this wonderful conference this morning. And I'd like to start with really acknowledging the efforts of the foundation and the fact that you're all here. Because like the quote so beautifully says, I think those who espouse for children's rights really have a vision for a better world, and so do all of you. And I find that really deeply, deeply moving. So it's wonderful to be here. And it's wonderful to talk about something that's really kind of captured my attention almost all my life. I have to tell you, I still remember that first time that I walked into an early childhood classroom, and I must have been sort of 18, 19. I was early days in my career. I was at uni, learning to be a teacher, and I stepped into this classroom and I looked at these children, and they were playing, and they were busy, and they were interacting, and they were moving, and there was something about it. It just captured my heart, it really did. And I think in hindsight, 40 years later, I can look back at that experience and actually talk about what it was that so deeply, deeply resonated with me. But back then, I think it just seemed so beautiful and so important and so engaging. So play has always been a passion for me. In education, my own children, of course, and recently, my grandchild. So now you're jealous, right? She's got a grandchild. Yeah, she does. Here he is. This is Naeemullah. He's 2, by the way. He just turned 2. But this is Naeem when he is, I think, 4 or 5 months old. Where's Naeem? Where's Naeem? Oh, yes! Where's Naeem? Naeem? So yeah, Naeem's bilingual. So what you hear there is my daughter Ella singing in Dutch. I'm sure you figured it out, right? Some of the translation that you did along the way. But I think you must also have noticed, like that critical thinking that's going on. This is a very young child, this is an infant, but at some point anticipates this game. And we have to really acknowledge, I think, Alison Skopnik's research, really started looking deeply, deeply at the learning of very young children, and all of a sudden we had to acknowledge that there is an infant there in the crib that's actually a scientist, constantly making sense of the world, anticipating, analyzing, projecting, predicting. So this young children's capacity to make sense of the world, of course, starts within the environment of relationships, like you see here. This infant, deeply connected to its mother, start to play games that mothers and fathers, grandfathers and grandmothers do across the world, don't they? But children get a little bit older, don't they? They grow and their physical ability changes. So here's Naeem again, but this time he's standing, and all of a sudden the way he looks at the world is slightly different, isn't it? All of a sudden you stand upright, there's a gaze outside to the world, and there's something interesting happening outside. Have a look.
Này, chị ạ.
The rain and the beauty of the rain, perhaps communicated through the movement of the hand, we don't know, right? But Naeem is starting to develop a relationship with the world, with rain, with the physical things that we see around us. Depending on where we're at, we're making sense of what is happening around us. And I think this is a really important thing to acknowledge when we think about children. This capacity to make sense of our experience. I've once heard this quote, and now I'm thinking I should be able to quote who actually said it, because it is so beautiful. This idea of living is searching for meaning. And the idea that we're all meaning makers, that we all want to make sense of our experience, that we all want to give meaning to it in our own way, is what makes us human. And children do that from the day that they're born. So this idea of children as active meaning makers, as researchers, as thinkers, is I think very prevalent in the way that I see children and the way that I interact with them. The things that I notice about children. Go back to Naeem, because he's growing up, he's walking now. So when you're 2, you can still talk to pigeons, right? I also have a video of Naeem who's talking to a rooster. That didn't work either. But isn't that beautiful though? And the idea that when you're 2 and you're new in the world, it's something to figure out, right? It's something to experience. Who knows? And who knows, maybe we can talk with pigeons. We just haven't figured it out yet. Right? So what I'd like you to do before I continue is to think about, if you look at that video of Naeem, what does it evoke in you? What kind of feelings, what kind of ideas, what do you notice about him? And what do you think is the significance of this moment? The reason why I'm asking this question, I think, is because I think the work that we do alongside children is so much about what lies within us. What we're noticing about children, what we're valuing about childhood. And when I look at this, what comes to my mind are many, many things. I see awe. I see analysis. I see him noticing and thinking about perhaps the reflections in the puddle, the ripples perhaps the sound of the water, perhaps the temperature of that day, who knows. And I really see him enchanted with the world. I see his uniqueness in the way that he interacts with the world, right? And I see communication. That ability to communicate with living things, to try and see if you can connect in a way is also happening there. So this very short moment holds such significance, doesn't it? But I think the other significant thing about it, of course, if you go along the line of meaning making, inquiry, research, thinking, it's also about the idea that this experience is also so unique. We all come from different places, we're all different people, and what we encounter is different for all of us. And this sense of uniqueness, I think, is another thing that is really important to acknowledge when we think about the work alongside young children. So it all revolves, I think, around this big question of how we can be worthy companions in the lives of children. Our own children, our own grandchildren, and the children that we teach, the the children that we lead and the teachers that we lead in our schools, the children in our states, and the children in our country. So what does it mean to be good companions, worthy companions of these researchers, meaning makers, thinkers, communicators? So what you see here, by the way, are my own children. A long time ago, they've now grown up, right? But yeah, having been a companion of my own children and now my grandchildren always reminds me of that big responsibility that we have to be worthy companions of children. And to do that, it's really important that we acknowledge these children as competent meaning makers, as thinkers, as researchers from the day that they're born. So it really is the identity that we give children that makes it possible, I think, to acknowledge certain competencies in children or to negate them. If we see children as scientists, as we see them as thinkers, if we see them as communicators, then all of a sudden we start to notice their capacity to make sense of the world, to talk about their ideas, to experiment, to figure things out. So this image of the child, this identity of learning, impacts then on the identity that we give to learning. Because if we don't see children as empty vessels, if we see them as scientists, as meaning makers, as thinkers, it also means that the role of teacher starts to shift. All of a sudden, we don't have to tell children everything all the time. Maybe sometimes we do, but often we listen, we ask questions, and we provide experience for children that help them to make sense of their experience. So that's a real shift, I think, in the role of the teacher, based on what we understand about children, the image of the child, so to say. Now, this beautiful conference is about building flourishing futures, and as I was listening, it's just so wonderful to hear such a hopeful message for India, for schools, for educators, for parents, for children, of course. But when we start talking about play, I think there's always a complexity in the room that I think is important to address. Because play evokes different ideas in different minds, it really does. And all across the world, it has different meanings for different people. And it's because play is so fluid and so beautiful. I think we all know what it is, and we all know what it feels like, but to define it is actually really, really hard. And depending on where we've grown up, universities that we've went to, the experiences that we've had, we all have different ideas about what play is or what it isn't. And language isn't very helpful either, because we play the violin, we play soccer, but we also play with blocks and we play with our friends. But all these words have different meanings, don't they? And then in the educational landscape, it becomes even more complicated, because we talk about play-based learning, playful learning, play, free play, guided play, structured play, playful inquiry, playful conceptual inquiry. I can go on, but you get my point, right? So what does it all mean? It's complex. I remember when I started, the international school context, let's say, that's what was my role as an international educator. I always worked with this idea that play was free play, but that was based on my own experience in the Netherlands. I only knew one kind of play. And I was like, guided play, structured play, what are they talking about? And so I think it is important to build as schools, as colleagues, a shared understanding of what we mean by that word. So that we're actually talking about the same thing. So what is play? And what does it mean to you? So the distinction that's been made by many people can be helpful in this conversation, I think. So many people, I think, are quite familiar with the idea of free play and structured play. And then free play as a space where there is a lot of choice for children. And structured play maybe as a space where there is less choice and there's more direction from the adults. But particularly guided play, I think, is a type of play that is often misunderstood. So guided play would be play where the adult sort of goes along with the grain of the child's thinking. So for example, if the child is building with blocks, you put them on top of each other, the adult might say something like, oh, I can see you're trying to build a high tower. Let's see, how can we make it higher? That's guided play, because you're going along with the child's thinking. And in order to do it well, you've really got to focus on what the child's thinking rather than what the child's doing. What is the child thinking about, right? Guided play could also take the form of like a responsive play environment where we set up a space where children through play can experience something. For example, a little shock or going to the doctors. And often teachers have created that space based on their observations. And so it's always going along with the thinking of the child. So I'm hoping that you're starting to sense the complexity and the beauty and the challenge of play-based educators in figuring out many things. Because it is about, I think, a balance of both child-initiated play, adult-initiated play, and guided play, and being that skillful play worker alongside children. So that requires a lot of thinking. And perhaps that balance or that equilibrium looks different for children who are 2, 4, or 6, or 10, or 15, or 18. So we have to keep on thinking about what that looks like for different learners. And perhaps also for individual learners, because not all children are the same, we know that, right? And maybe some children are ready for more structure earlier than others. So why is play so powerful? It builds competencies in children. It honors their curiosity. And it provides a space, I think, for creative and critical thinking. And through all of that, we build these confident learners that are ready to engage with the world with this curiosity, with this zest for learning. Competent learners. So what I hope that you'll take away from watching Naeem engage with the world is this idea of an innate capacity that children have to make sense of the world. But we also know that through play, children develop a set of skills that we then, that helps them to become self-regulated learners. It helps them to work with focus, multiple ideas in mind, to be resilient, and to engage with something that someone else is asking you to do. So play really helps to build the foundation to be a self-regulated learner. And it acknowledges this meaning-making capacity that children have, because we engage with them as these meaning-makers, as these thinkers, as these researchers, making connections, talking about their experience. And it's a beautiful thing. The moment we start doing this, I think what happens is that we really start to get a glimpse of the beauty of the way that children engage with their social, cultural worlds. I think what play also does is that it provides a space that really belongs to children, doesn't it? Children are so passionate about learning. And so passionate about play. So if we meet them in that space that belongs to them, if we meet them in a place where they can make choices, what we see is that it really builds children's sense of self-efficacy. So self-efficacy is the believing in yourself that you can achieve a certain goal. Now, that sense is important when it comes to learning, doesn't it? And some people would even say that our sense of self-efficacy is the cornerstone of our sense of agency. The idea that we can make changes in the world, and that we're not simply undergoing our experiences, we're actively part of it, aren't we? So in that sense, all of this is part of citizenship. It's part of being in the world. A sense of self-efficacy, a sense of agency, a sense of citizenship. Being part of a community, negotiating, being resilient, expressing your ideas, thinking to the ideas of others, influencing your learning, influencing the learning of others. All of that foundation is built through that. So through that, I think we also build an increasing sense of our own autonomy. Our sense of independence, but also our sense of interdependence. And last but not least, our ability to think creatively and to think critically. So thinking as a skill can be distinguished between our ability to generate ideas and our ability to analyze ideas. So the analysis is about pulling things apart and putting them back together again, making connections. Creative thinking is a lot about using our gut feeling, using our imagination, and to make kind of unexpected connections between ideas. And there's often an overlap between those two thinking skills, because we can't think creatively without analyzing things and breaking things apart, and then perhaps putting together in unexpected, new and unexpected ways. So play is a space where children generate critical and creative thinking all the time, and they're influencing each other, of course, which is so wonderful, right? So it's also about social skills, it's also about communicating with each other. It's also about self-regulation, right? Because sometimes you have to take turns, and sometimes you have to focus on something, and then you have to be resilient in it. So all of that is happening at the same time. But it's also research, it's also about figuring things out. Have a look, see what it I turn it, and it goes down. Now this was sort of the start of a big investigation a couple of years when I was back in the classroom into motion, in causation. Like how do we put things in motion? And how do we stop things from moving as well? So often what you see is that kind of juxtaposition in children's research. Because things evolve. And if teachers engage in this cycle of observation, documentation, interpretation, and planning, it allows them to stay very connected to the children's thinking, but also to perhaps take something away or add something to their environment that provides new possibilities. Have a look. Oh, now we got a problem solved as well, right? Yeah, just something as simple as these pipes they're cut into provides new possibilities. And that noticing, and did you notice this boy looking? And what are ways that we can expand these pathways? And lots of collaboration. See if you can figure out what's happening here. So first of all, of course, there is the challenge of building the ramp and building that together. That's not always easy when you're four. And then all of a sudden there is this idea, like what can we put there to stop something from moving? And how can we figure out how to do this in such a way that we're actually doing this together? And that we're not in each other's space at the same. So all of that are challenges that children are negotiating in that moment. And then they're talking about it, and they're trying something new. So what I find with very young children is this analyzing and generating ideas is happening almost simultaneously, particularly in their relationship and their interactions with materials in the space. Young children need things to act on. And then what you'll see is that these young children are amazing thinkers, and they need much, just a block and a tube, something that rolls. It could be a little ball or a rock, anything really. can help you investigate and research the world, can help you develop your ability to think critically and creatively. Yeah, walking movement, creating movement. How can we make this thing go faster? This is all research. This is all thinking. This is all meaning making. And it all builds that foundation for learning. And what's joy? So I kind of want to sort of, I was smiling when I was thinking about what Mr. Ambani was talking about, and this idea of joy in learning, and it is so important, isn't it? You know, we're joyful, we're engaged, we're invested, and we're with others. And all of that is happening. And I think children are programmed to do this, they really are. I think another thing that children are programmed for is really their ability to think with imagination. And role play is another beautiful dimension of childhood, isn't it? And perhaps this ability to think creatively is really the laboratory of the possible. This is why we as people are such a clever specimen. And we invented a bow once upon a time, right? A bow and arrow. We actually invented this. And it had such an impact on the development of our humanity. We imagine artificial intelligence, but it's all born in our capacity to think creatively. And children are creative thinkers. But how can we be worthy companions in children's lives and make sure that they don't lose that capacity as they grow? And I think it is really through that listening, and it is through that observing and documenting and interpreting and planning in response to children's thinking. So making sure that we see the problems, the challenges that children are creating in their play. That we allow them to kind of engage with that problem, make it more complicated in ways, and find solutions. And in order to do that, we've got to be really invested and engaged in children's thinking. And we've really got to figure out what they're thinking rather than what they're doing. So in order to do that, I think we really sort of have to go back to our image of the child. We have to start with ourselves. The ideas that we have about learning, the ideas that we have about learners. And really starting with that intention of worthy companionship in the lives of children. And to do that well, I think, you have to observe with a curious, nurturing eye. There are curiosities about children and childhood and learning. Listening with your heart and your mind. Marveling alongside children. The beauty of the world. Ample room for experimentation. Oh no. And embrace the art of attentive listening. For me, documentation really is about attentive listening, about noticing, documenting children's thinking, documenting their discoveries, their thinking, their joy, their research, their discoveries, and sharing those stories with families and colleagues. To unleash the power of play. Thank you.